Hey, welcome back. This is Speaking the Game. It's episode 4. I'm your host, R.Wright, with Elite Coach E.
Hey.
We're back again. Just a little quick recap to our last episode. We talked a little bit about the 9 out of 10, the dunk contest, and how Aaron Gordon was robbed by your boy D Wade. And
can I say something?
Our conspiracies. What's up?
Magic all day.
You shouldn't have said that. But I guess for you Magic fans, good job. Good luck for y'all. I guess you're trying to win something, I guess. One day you guys will, hopefully.
One day.
If you guys can't be stupid enough to keep, never mind, overpaying for certain players. But that's neither here nor there, and I'm not going to rag on you Magics today. But today, let's talk about what everybody else is still talking about. Let's talk about The Last Dance, the last 2 episodes that happened on Sunday. Talk to me. What was your biggest takeaway? What was your vibes from that?
Honestly, my biggest takeaway, I think we're gonna get into it later. Sir Charles, I forget because I was very young during that series. I was 5, so I didn't fully grasp it. I only heard stories from my mom and from my dad. So I forget how great Charles Barkley was. My second biggest takeaway, I think Michael Jordan was suspended for gambling. I'm pretty accurate. I don't care what the documentary tells us. I don't care what anybody says. He was suspended for gambling.
That's the rumors.
How was his dad murdered again?
I don't know all the details.
He was murdered, right?
I don't know all the details to that. So I'm gonna put it to you like this, because I'm pretty sure that's gonna be one of the next episodes when they talk about his dad. I'm kind of shocked that they did, and I thought that they were gonna do that.
You gotta set it up for the climax and then drop us down, you know?
Yeah. Well, I've heard a couple of things about the documentary too. That they just completed it. They just completed the 10th episode not too long ago.
So they really sped this up. Even though it should have been dropped a month ago.
No, but it shouldn't have. Because they were aiming for a June release. So you're talking about you aim for a June release and you push it up 2 months. So they weren't fully completed as far as how they were going to do the timeline, what they were going to edit. That's why 2 weeks ago they were able to curse.
Back and forth. And that's probably why they changed former Chicago resident Barack Obama to president this last episode. Okay.
Yeah, but all right. So, I mean, a lot of that has to do with the editing team, and you're asking a lot for people that aren't actually in the same building as each other. So a couple of things stood out to me for this, and I want to touch on it a little bit. One, I did not realize how early it was that Toni Kukoc was actually drafted to the Bulls.
100%. I didn't realize he sat out. He waited 2 years,
longer.
How long was it? I thought it was just 2 seasons.
Think about this. Toni Kukoc was drafted after they won their first championship.
No.
Yes.
I thought he just sat out 2 seasons.
They said 90.
I thought he was waiting out. I thought the when he played against the Dream Team in the 94 Olympics.
That was 92.
See, I thought
that was 92.
So I was all thrown off there.
So that was 92. That was after they just played the Blazers. Okay. After they played the Lakers the year before.
That's when he was actually drafted.
He was drafted in the second round. So think about that. So
imagine he was a second round pickup?
Yes, he was the second pick in the second round.
Hold on.
So hold on, because you got to remember, internationals back then is different. At that point, you have Vlade Divac, who at that point was on the Lakers.
You already drafted Sabonis.
You had Sabonis was drafted, but he didn't play. He wasn't playing. He was still overseas. And then you have Dragan Petrovic. You have Saranis Marciulionis in Golden State.
That's crazy. You're naming people the European players who obviously were dominating.
Yeah, but they paid.
That I didn't know of. The only European player you're naming that I knew of was Vlade.
Yeah, Petrovic was that player that, I'm going to be honest, because I remember this, the Nets, they were a solid young team. They had a point guard in Kenny Anderson. They had a forward who I mentioned in episode 3, Derek Coleman, who at the time was easily one of the top 5 to 10 point guards in the league. And he was a lefty, strong lefty that could shoot. He was the less athletic version of Chris Webber. You know, if you compared the two, and they both were from Detroit, I believe. So there's a lot of similarities
to compare.
Yeah, and but not to harp on that, Dražen Petrovic was that next guy. Like, nobody really believed in him. He was on Portland. Portland couldn't do anything with him, so Portland traded him to the Nets, and that's when he was really starting. Like, he was really starting to hit his stride. And you're talking about, he was a player that was before his time too. So he could shoot out the gym, and he died a tragic accident when he went home over the summer. And
now I have a question for you. Weren't most of these European basketball players on the downhill of their career since they ballooned so much? Like Sabonis. The only reason why I say that is because of Sabonis. When he finally decided to come over to the States and play in the NBA, he had already had a lengthy career in Europe.
Yeah, but he was already drafted. He was drafted a long time prior to that. Like, Portland just had his rights. Portland was smart for not letting go his rights.
What's up with Portland? Like, I feel like, I know this isn't on like the list. What's up with Portland? Like, they constantly have drafted really good international players. Like, I didn't even know who that GM was.
So, I mean,
I know it's not on the list of what we have, but
the thing is, and to touch on that briefly, international players, there weren't too many scouts going over international, and it said a lot because when you think, like, there was rumors about guys, but a lot of these guys, like, the EuroLeague was nothing like what it is now. So think about, if the EuroLeague was like what it is now to what it is then now you're looking at all the top players easily getting picked earlier, which happened years later. You know what I'm saying? So when you're talking about that, like, there was a handful of internationals, there was a handful of guys, and then you got to remember, we're fresh off of a couple of wars. Okay. You know? So
that's true.
So when you
whole country, Yugoslavia is just gone.
and they were at war. Like, so think about it, and bring this back to Kukoc. If his country wasn't at war the way that it was, but if it wasn't at war,
he would have been over.
He would have been part of the second championship and the third championship.
And he was a 6'10" point forward. So not only is Scotty a 6'7", 6'8" point forward.
Yep.
You would add on a 6'10", let's just be honest, a 6'11" point forward, who was lefty.
You said Lamar Odom, what?
I didn't say Lamar Odom. I was talking about Kukoc. Like, you add on like another point forward.
I know, but I want you to put it in perspective. Like, him and Lamar Odom were like, their style of play was very similar because they were that point forward. They were that point guard. They can go get it, but they could dish it too, which is why Lamar Odom worked well in the triangle offense. Now, the same thing with Toni. And here's my thing, and just to touch base back on the whole thing with Toni, like, if Toni had played in the second or third championship, now you're talking about a Bulls team when Jordan does retire the first time. That team was good. And that's when Kukoc came over. Kukoc came over after that third championship. So to touch base, and I love that they went back to the Dream Team just to specifically touch on Toni, but I wish they touched more on Toni Kukoc.
Agreed. I wanted
a little bit more of him.
That was probably my biggest takeaway, is I wish they would have touched more on Toni Kukoc, because I don't think, even myself, I'm going to speak for myself, like, even though I have friends who are from Yugoslavia, the country, and they came over here, like, I met them when I was 7, so I knew they were from Yugoslavia. I didn't know they were from Croatia or Slovenia or anywhere else. I knew that there was a major genocide going on. I knew that there was a major war, that there were many different civil wars. I wish that maybe the documentary touched in on that to show how much of a killer on the court Kukoc was, how cold-blooded Kukoc was, because to understand that, like, your entire country is being divided and split in modern times, to understand that you might have to go to war, or some of your family members are going to war.
And look how that affected the Olympics, because you had Yugoslavia and Serbia. So, and they, at the time, and you look at
Croatia.
Yes. So when you look at all three of those teams, They're some
Can you
of
imagine the one team that they would have had?
Because you're talking now Vladi with Toni, Dino Raja. You got all of these guys. You got Peja Stojakovic that came up in that same thing.
So let's be honest here. Luka Doncic would have been on Team Yugoslavia today because where's he from? Slovenia.
No, he wouldn't have. I thought it wasn't broken up in the fours. I thought it was only broken in threes. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm not gonna.
But let's be honest. He would have been part of Team Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was like 4 or 5 different countries.
Yeah. So, but when you look at, all right. So, without going too far in depth into that,
we ain't talking about history right now.
Nah. My whole thing is, Kukoc proved that.
Yep.
What you were saying, he proved it. Only because that first game he was shocked. He didn't know. But then you got to look at you look at Scotty, you look at MJ, and you brought this up. And you was like, well, I wasn't. You didn't know if Big Brother and Little Brother, really vibed and meshed. It was like, nah. Michael stuck up for Scotty in so many different ways. Like,
and that right there showed it.
Yeah. So it's like when no, he told everybody on the dream team, me and Scotty got him. Me and Scotty got him. Y'all worry about him.
Isn't that crazy that Michael had to say that and not Scotty?
Michael was the tone setter. You got to remember, Michael just proved he was the alpha at that point, and before they even went to the Olympics, because they told that story in practice. Like, he became the alpha then. That's when everybody was like, oh, okay, well, you are the man. And that's where people got to understand, like, I go back to the whole Isaiah Thomas thing real quick, and because people are still talking about, MJ left him off the. No, who cares? He wasn't gonna fit on the team. He wasn't, and you look at it, and the fact that they mentioned that they touched at the end of everything, they were closer, but they battled, and you can't battle, and you know this. You
can't battle people.
There's some type of people you can battle with in practice and be ready to go to war with on the court.
And there's some people you can't.
Yes, and you
just don't care.
And you look at the chemistry because there's limits. And some players won't cross those limits or go to those limits. Now you're saying, well, you're going to put everybody on the team in jeopardy and you're going to look at that chemistry. I'm like, listen, I'm taking Stockton over Isaiah. I'm taking Magic over Isaiah. It makes sense. And then you look at the guards, and you can't forget Scotty also played guard. So you had Scotty.
That was the number 3 takeaway for me right there. That was the number 3 takeaway, is that they actually dove in a little bit deeper in on that topic about Zeke.
And that's what I liked. But once again, like, I feel like Isaiah has to look at it in hindsight, and it wasn't like, yo, you got left off the team because of who you were. Like, you got left off because of fit, and you wasn't gonna fit. And you gotta understand, like, y'all. All right, yeah, Michael might have said who's on the team, fam. If somebody asks me, yo, do you want to go out? You want to go do this? You want to do that? The first thing I'm asking is, yo, who's going?
Right.
Because it has nothing to do with like one particular person, but I need to get either mentally or physically or emotionally prepared before I step out. Correct. So before we go on to the next thing, I do want to mention one thing that BJ Armstrong said. Okay. And for the record, at that point, at that time, BJ Armstrong was my favorite Bull.
Okay, keep going.
Okay. BJ Armstrong said something that stuck out when he was talking about going into that Phoenix series. Okay. That going into the third season, BJ Armstrong said Michael wasn't playing anymore. He figured out how to win. We were playing, he was winning. He figured out how to win to the point where it was easy. So that's when you said, oh, he got suspended. Like, nah, I real deal genuinely think
he just stopped
because it was the mental part of the game, and he was exhausted. No. He was exhausted.
I can't get with that.
Yo, look at it. Because I talked about it with my brother the other day, and I was like, yo, like, the fact that nobody, like, this is one thing I think is huge, and it says a lot about MJ. MJ figured out how to win, and that's all he cared about. When he also said, yo, you got a gambling. No, I got a competitive problem. Like, I got a competition problem. Like, I got to compete at everything.
I got to butt in on this, Ralph.
All right.
I got to butt in. He said, I don't have a gambling problem. If I had a gambling problem, I would have lost my wife. I wouldn't have food. I wouldn't have lights. Dude, you're almost a billionaire at that time. Like, let's be real. Like, I know we're talking about 30 years before.
Yeah,
Dude,
but
you ain't never gonna lose nothing. Let's be honest. You were already making almost damn near $1 billion for Nike when Nike only made $200,000
to an extent because his contract wasn't really set up like that until the second time he came.
But let's be honest,
with Nike,
like he wasn't
just to be. But my whole thing is this: it's the fact that he knew how to win. So he took that. The game is like this to him now. Like he's not even going to the game to play.
Okay.
He's going like the game is a Sudoku puzzle.
He already solved it. He looked at it and just knew it.
Everybody's playing, and he's just like,
got it.
I'm gonna pick. He's literally picking his spots. So before we go to the next thing, I want to touch on what he said about Kobe to start the episode because I know everybody's talking about Kobe.
Mm-hmm. Yo, that's my favorite player.
That conversation that he had,
that gave me chills and goosebumps.
Let me explain something to you. What MJ did. MJ threw a filler.
Okay.
MJ was in the locker room and threw a filler. So here's what
that little Laker boy.
He threw it out there just to see who was gonna bite, because he wanted to get the consensus of everybody else in the room who was all-stars.
Because by that time, every team had already played Lakers.
You got Glenn Rice in the locker room. You got Tim Hardaway. You got Reggie Miller. You got Penny Hardaway. You got Shawn Kemp. You want to know whose voice was the only person that was talking to MJ when MJ was talking about Kobe?
Speak up.
You want to know?
Speak up.
It was Shawn Kemp. Shawn Kemp was the only person whose voice was talking. So what I paid attention to was who wasn't talking. You know who wasn't talking?
Penny. I'm not Penny. Hardaway.
Penny wasn't talking. Penny's face. Penny's face. If you go back to that clip,
he was like, was he like this?
Yeah, look at Penny's face. Look at Reggie's face. Like,
that actually hurt me. That actually hurt me to see the face. Honestly,
no, because it's like, I'm not saying nothing. Because I think at that point they already knew he was a problem. MJ knew he was a problem, but he was trying to get a consensus. And if you're like me, and you as a former player, like and as a point guard, even as a coach, your nonverbals say more to me than your verbals ever will.
That it hurt me to see Penny's face like that.
Kemp talking reckless because Kemp ain't got to guard him.
Nope.
Kemp. That's why I was like, yo. And that's
like
why
over here, Kemp over here talking big stuff.
He was talking
like a big man. Like, man, y'all ain't got to worry about him, man.
Yeah.
Nobody. That's just a guard. He misses shots.
But then you look at Reggie, and you look at Penny, and you look at all the guards. Even Tim Hardaway was like,
No, he coming at everybody's head. It don't matter if he missed shots right now. He getting it.
Yeah, he's missing. He ain't gonna miss a shot, but he's coming at it.
The fact that he made an All-Star game when he did,
coming off the bench,
says a lot.
Coming off the bench, he didn't start. They had four. The Lakers had 4 All-Stars that year, and Kobe Bryant was a starting All-Star. Got the starting vote in the Western Conference, and that says a lot because what people don't understand,
the players love him.
How hard it is to make the All-Star team in the Western Conference. From a guard and a wing position, it is super hard to make the All-Star team in the Western Conference.
To this day.
So while we're talking about the Western Conference, let's transition to the Phoenix Suns real quick. The one thing I want to talk about before we dive into this real next topic was that little clip of the Suns reminded me of how nice Richard Dumers was. Okay, so you're going to go Richard Dumers, where I'm going to go, okay, so I was too young to really fully appreciate Charles Barkley. My Charles Barkley, I seen him on TNT, okay? I seen him on TNT, big, heavy dude. I know he played at Auburn. I know, Auburn's not known for any players. Chuck Person.
That's really, I understand. Chuck was 6'4", let's say 6'5", on a great day. Let's be honest. If we're doing NBA true height, he's 6'4".
Okay.
Playing
one of the best players
forward,
pound for pound.
One of the best players pound for pound.
Mm-hmm.
No argues anymore. Mm-hmm. After seeing the right after, I started watching some highlights of Sir Charles. I can't call him Charles Barkley no more. He is Sir Charles from here on out.
Yep.
That man was a beast. But it makes no sense.
All right, so
it makes no sense what he was able to do.
So let me ask you a question. Well, not me ask you a question, but let me bring this up. Me and you had a conversation.
Okay.
Before the draft, and you asked me, who did Zion remind me of?
You did say Chuck.
Who did I say?
Sir Charles. You said Sir Charles.
I said Charles Barkley.
And
you said why? I said go look at the tapes.
And I didn't. I didn't at the time. I did not at the time. But I knew that if you said that, I'm like, okay, Charles Barkley is a top 50 all-time greatest players to ever played. for you to compare that, I'm like, you know what? Zion's in a whole different ballpark right now.
His motor is crazy.
Yo, Charles was on go.
Yes, and what people. This is why I say it's real important what team drafts a player, because I feel like the organization could make or break a player and turn that player either to a bust.
It's only Jerry right now,
or help make no.
it's all about the org. It's all about the org.
It's all right. So it's two things. Yes, you need that player, but you need a solid organization, because if you don't have a solid organization, you will not have a plan for that player to follow, and that player will be all over the place, and they're just trying to play. So because they're trying to play,
IE fans, if a player's drafted to the Knicks right now, that's what he's trying to say. Like if a really good player is drafted to the Knicks right now, are they going to have the type of career they need to have? Just for clarification.
Can that help them? Can that organization help them reach their potential? Correct. If they can't, you're going to be like, oh, that player's a bust. All right, to an extent, it could be the player, but it's the organization's duty to prepare them. That's why examples. I love Trae
Young. I have two examples. Trae Young was going to be one, and Steph Curry was my second.
Oh, yes.
Those two players not in those organizations, they're not the same.
But the organization, and I'm glad you said that, because I want to touch on Steph real quick, and then we're going to go right back to Barkley in a second. Steph and Trae, these were two players that were drafted into these two organizations. Mm-hmm. At the time,
the perfect organization.
The Atlanta Hawks were trying to rebrand themselves. Mm-hmm. So because they were trying to rebrand themselves, he is the perfect model. Now, who does Atlanta have the opportunity to look at for their blueprint? The Golden State Warriors. One of the Warriors' assistant general managers, is in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. So when you look at what Atlanta's doing, it's not a surprise. I'm not shocked. Already there. So when you look at that blueprint and you look at a player like Steph, Golden State did whatever they had to do to put Steph in that position. And this is why, and I'm going to touch back on Jimmer. Jimmer and Steph, their games were similar. Mm-hmm. Jimmer at one point had better handle than Steph, but Jimmer's range was way more unlimited than Steph. Mm-hmm. The difference is Jimmer gets drafted by the Kings. The Kings don't know what they want to do. Plus, they don't let him be him. They try to change him.
Didn't they draft Johnny Flynn, the same draft?
Johnny Flynn was drafted by the Minnesota Timberwolves.
But then wasn't he traded?
By the time Flynn was traded, time Flynn left Minnesota, he had an illness, so he was kind of out the league.
But wasn't like that, really close?
Mm-mm. It wasn't like that, because I forgot who Flynn was in that Ricky Rubio, the Ricky Rubio draft with Steph Curry, because Steph Curry was in that Rubio draft. And that's another thing, because Rubio's still one of the better guards that nobody wants to talk about, but we'll talk about him some other time. But right now, just circling it back to Barkley, just to throw out Barkley's career stats: 22.1 points a game, 11 rebounds a game, and 3.9 assists. We talked a couple weeks ago about Scotty when he signed a $2.5 million contract for 7 years, right? $2.5 million over the course of 7 years. In 90, it started, right? Barkley was making $2.9 million. 90-91, right? In 91-92, Barkley was making $3.2 million, right? That's the year before his MVP year. By the time 97-98, which was the end of Scotty's contract, okay, right? Barkley was making $2.2 million.
That's a lot. That's really low if I'm thinking about it.
So in a broader aspect, I wanted to look at that, because it's like, Barkley never got paid the amount that he should have.
No.
And as much people want to talk about, he didn't win a championship. Listen, Michael Jordan,
Game 7 away from winning.
He played Michael Jordan when Michael Jordan wasn't playing the game anymore.
Okay.
If he plays Michael Jordan the year before, Phoenix and with that Phoenix team, you got to remember, Richard Dumas, to me, and that's why I brought up Richard Dumas, is because he was a player that the Bulls struggled to play. He was a combo forward. He could do a little bit of everything, and he was super athletic.
Yeah, I think about the forwards that were on that team.
Yeah, and then
the Bulls, who was guarding him.
But him being a combo forward, him and Barkley are now interchangeable. That makes Barkley more dangerous. Oh, and who else do you have on the other wing? You got Dan Marley, a 6'7" shooting guard that can play small forward too, that had the burner on him. All right, well then, who had the better point guard? Phoenix had the better team outside of Michael Jordan.
Which is why they had home court advantage.
Yes. But Paul Westphal did a hell of a job that year as coach. Like when you look at that team top to bottom, they had the Frank Johnson was the backup point guard. He was nice. When you just look at that Phoenix team was probably their best team ever assembled. And it's crazy when you look at it. When you think like they couldn't rebuild or bring anything else back. They did make a trade. I want to say 2 years later because he got traded for Robert Horry. Charles Barkley got traded for Robert Horry.
It's a crazy trade when you think about it.
It is, but that just tells you where Robert Horry was. But Robert Horry for another day.
Another Alabama.
Another things, a couple other things that stuck out. Outside of that was just looking at the fact that so to bring back my point and when I was saying it depends on what an organization does when they draft a player. Barkley was drafted to the Philadelphia 76ers right after they won the championship. They didn't need him. Think about the Hall of Famers they had on their team. Dr. J was on that team. Moses Malone was on that team.
They didn't need him.
But they didn't need him. But it was his rookie year, he averaged 14 points a game on a stacked squad. Like, think about that. Like, Mo Cheeks was on that team, I believe. I forgot who else. They had a squad in that Philadelphia team. And Moses Malone, who's a guaranteed first ballot Hall of Famer at the time, takes Lil Barkley under the wing. And you're talking about one of the best rebounders the game has ever seen is Moses Malone. So when you put that in perspective, it's like, he had the right vets around him to learn how to be a professional, to not just, when it's your time and we give the keys to you, this is what you like, you're going to go out and you're going to do it. Now you match that with his motor.
Barkley's motor was untouched.
Yes.
I mean, the only other motor that was like that was Michael's.
Dennis Rodman.
Oh, well, Dennis Rodman, but what I'm talking about, like, impact players with the ball in their hand who are going to lead their team in scoring, who are going to lead their team in rebounds and other stat lines. It was Michael.
Yes.
Michael's going to lead the team in other stat lines. Like, Dennis Rodman's going to lead your team in rebounds and, like, deflections, but that's not, like, a real stat.
And what people don't realize is that Charles Barkley was the best player on that Dream Team team. Statistically. He was the mismatch.
So if you look at the stat, 100%. He was always the mismatch. He was
the mismatch for that.
He's what Draymond Green wishes he really was.
And he was super dominant. And I really don't want to get on the whole Draymond Green.
We're not talking about that. We're not talking. I don't have time for that right now.
Because that's a different conversation for a different.
Like for Draymond, like it makes me like looking at this last episode makes me look at how Draymond ever speaks to Charles.
So
it makes me rethink and relook at everything. Like, don't you ever talk to Sir Charles? I can't call him Charles Barkley. Don't ever talk about Sir Charles like this.
So that's where I wish that this next generation, not just next generation, the younger people that didn't get a chance to see Charles Barkley to actually look at the game. I think a lot of people are disrespecting what happened in the 90s, the style of play that happened in the 90s. Like, stop saying that a player that's in this generation right now could go back and do the things that they're doing now, because the game is completely different. You can always look at a player from back then and say, does their game translate over now? You're talking about Charles Barkley in the open court.
I will say this. This revisiting this documentary is making me revisit that exact question. What players can play back in the 90s versus what players can play today? Like there's only a few players who could play back then. Like, I think Steph Curry could play back then in a totally different role.
Yeah, his father. But that's a different conversation for a different day.
But do I think Charles Barkley could thrive and dominate in today's game? Yes, he will be an oversized shooting guard, small forward.
I think every player every player that was dominant in the 90s and some could be equally as dominant, if not more dominant now.
I think all of them minus some of the post players. Most, if not all the post players.
All the post players can shoot. When I'm saying the dominant players, Pat had the 18-footer, so you're saying, all right, bring him now. In today's game, he's hitting that three because he was hitting it in his career. So he could hit that three. So, and now at what point do you say that those players can't play? David Robinson was super uber athletic. So good luck for anybody trying to guard him. Okay. So, and I'm only talking about the dominant players. I'm not talking about, the Mark Eatons of the world.
I'm with you.
But even though Rudy Gobert and Mark Eaton are the same.
So now that you're talking about Pat, now when you say Pat, you're talking about Pat Ewing.
Yes,
and the team he's on, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's talk about those 90s Knicks, man.
So I will say this, growing up, my brothers, he really wasn't part of the 90s Knicks. Mm-hmm. My brother's two favorite players was Allen Houston and Latrell Sprewell. That wasn't really the 90s Knicks, but it was close enough though, right? They weren't
because
my brother had braids because of Latrell. It wasn't because of Iverson. It was Latrell.
I feel like those 90s Knicks,
like we had a pair of Donnas with the spinning wheel. Yeah.
Let's freeze.
We had the freeze.
Man. Like, all right, so before we touch on, even because we could talk a little bit about those 2000 teams, but the 90s Knicks teams were, when you look at their roster top to bottom, there's no way they lose to the
point guard. You have Mark. Which
one? He wasn't the only one. Because you're talking about Mark Harper.
Derek
Harper. No,
I'm talking about Mark Jackson.
He wasn't there during those years. He was there. He wasn't there because what people don't understand is at one point the Knicks had Mark Jackson and Rod Strickland in the 80s.
Okay.
In the 80s, and they got rid of both of those guys. Think about that.
Are you talking about the John Starks, Nick?
I'm talking. Okay. You're looking at John Starks. You had Greg Anthony. You had Derek Harper.
Greg Anthony, who I think is better than his son.
You had Anthony Mason. You had Rolando Blackman, which
I don't know too much about him. I'm sorry.
All right, so just to put this in the air, Rolando Blackman, I believe, is a Hall of Famer. If not, he's on the cusp of a Hall of Famer, but he's one of the best Dallas Maverick players to ever play, like for the Mavericks. So was Derek Harper. They both came from the Mavericks and went over to the Knicks. So they were like in the Mavericks when like the Mavericks first started. But Rolando Blackman could D up. He was like a poor man's Clyde Drexler. He could shoot. He could D up. Then you had Derek Harper.
Don't disrespect my mom's favorite player like that.
No, I'm not disrespecting. Like
she loved herself from Clyde.
I mean, Clyde was nice.
To this, Rob.
Clyde couldn't go left if you paid him.
He really couldn't. But he was one of those players.
And he dribbled with his head down.
Listen, he was one of those players like, I ain't gonna stop until you make me stop.
Yes, but I think all right. So he's one of those players that I feel like he'd get the clamps on him right now.
When he was one of those players that could not play in today's game.
He reminds me of Lenny Wilkins. Like Lenny Wilkins was a left-handed bandit as a player.
And I swear, only the left eye was open because that's the only way he was going.
And was a Hall of Famer. Like the fact that you could only go one way and still make it to the Hall of Fame said a lot about how good you were. To be one way and still be able to, come on, man, you can't stop. You know I'm going right 10 times out of 10. You still can't stop me. That says more about the skill level.
I'm gonna be honest. So as a former coach, right, I would recruit players, and we would be sitting in the war room. We call it the war room, where we would talk about what players we would actually recruit, how much scholarship money each player would get. And there was a player we had recruited when I was at University of Mobile, Alabama. Mm-hmm. Girl could only go right, and the coach said she can only go right. I said, find someone who can stop her. Just find someone who can stop her. Once you can do that, then okay, we'll go on to somebody else. This girl only went right. Like what?
You can't stop her.
You can't stop her. She was too quick. In and out all day. Couldn't stop her. But keep on going.
So all right.
90s Knicks.
So you look at, and then you had Charles Oakley. I don't even want.
Oak.
Yeah, and then you had Ewing in his prime.
Now you had the rigged draft to get Ewing, which I thought was brilliant because they needed it.
It's interesting that everybody harps on that as being a rigged draft.
Wasn't it like the bent or the cold envelope?
It was cold, I believe, but the Knicks haven't had a number one pick since.
Man, they really thought they were going to get Zion in this one. They really thought it was rigged. Too bad for computers.
No, there was no way it was. The league is not giving James Dolan.
They were going to get KD. They were going to get Irving and Zion.
You think? All right, let me ask you a question. Do you think it was a coincidence that the Lakers and New Orleans got the first and second pick in the draft?
No, not at all. Like, why would you ever send that talent to New York?
I mean, not second pick, first and third pick.
Why would you ever give Dolan what he wants? Because Dolan seems like the biggest butthole to deal with.
Dolan right now,
he seems like the guy who's out of the club.
Honestly,
like,
the Knicks are starting.
He might be owner, but he's out of the owner's club.
I think if he doesn't get it right in the next 2 years,
they're gonna make him sell.
But he's making so much money, and they would basically have to force the Knicks out of Madison Square Garden to make that happen, and I don't see that happening.
I think they would make him sell the team, but of course he owns Madison Square.
Exactly.
So they would make him have
but they would basically force the Knicks out of Madison Square Garden. Because there's no way you're gonna force. Yeah, because there's no way you're gonna force me out as owner of my team and then still want to use my building. All right, come on. That's like dating somebody, living with them, right? And then you break up, and then they just continue to live with you, and don't pay rent.
Not happening.
Come on, that ain't happening. It's no. So back to those Knicks teams, like you had Xavier McDaniel was on those teams too, like, and you had Charles Smith was on those teams, and Charles Smith when he was with the Clippers was really, really good. So like you had a squad, like the Knicks had a squad. I'm just sorry you just ran into Michael Jordan, and they proved it because that first year they made it to the finals. They made it to the O.J. Simpson finals, because that's what I call it. Because I was so pissed. Like, you don't understand. Like, my love for basketball is probably 2-3 seasons deep at this point, right? And then it's interrupted by a Bronco, just driving on the highway. And I'm like, I just want to watch the game. The game is still going on. Like, they're not even making updates. I don't know how it was in other cities, but I know when I was watching the game, they weren't making updates to the game. The game was still being played. Everybody was trying to figure out where OJ was, or, where's OJ going? Eventually he has to run out of gas. And let me tell you, that Bronco was great on gas because it was a while. It was like a long while. And then eventually they went to the game. And, if any year the Knicks were going to win, it was going to be a 94. But they couldn't do it. And that Houston team was great. They had a solid mix of vets, and they had a solid mix of rookies.
Listen, so. They seem to get hit really hard by a clash of many different dynasties or short-run dynasties. The Knicks had their opportunity. Sorry. Just wasn't meant for you.
But just think about this, right? Anthony Mason, when he leaves the Knicks, he becomes an all-star in Charlotte. Okay. So, and Starks was great. Like, he was a great addition to that team. Like, I looked at that Knicks team, and it's like, wow, you could put that Knicks team in today's game, and it'd be interesting. Like, it'd be an interesting game. It'd be interesting to see who can beat that team in today's game, because there's not too many teams I feel like could beat that 90s Knicks team.
I think you're right, but once again, it comes down to Michael Jordan and his Bulls. Are you getting past them? The answer is no. Never.
I think if they were the Knicks before the Pistons, like if they got to the Bulls before the Pistons, then I think they beat them. But the Pistons beat them up physically and mentally for over 3 years. So by the time you get to the Knicks, hey, we already know. At this time, right, Baby Pippen is now a grown man. You know what I'm saying? Like, Horace is filling out. You look at their squad, and it's like, yo, good luck. And you're dealing with a Michael that already knows, like, he knows how to win. You're not playing, like, you're not defeating Michael. You got to beat everybody else on the team that already has the confidence that know that they're going to win. Because they know if they play their game, Michael's going to do the rest. and that's what it was, and that's what it looked like. Everybody played their role. And that's why I hate when they was like, oh, the Bulls team was this, the Bulls team was that. Man, you better go back and look at those Bulls team, because they had players. They just had players that championed their role. Like you didn't hear, like, in any of this, have you heard of one player that was mad at their role? In both championship teams, you didn't hear one player that was mad at their role.
I think that was probably an error. I would say only with the very select few teams in the league today, where every player is very satisfied in their role.
Golden State, San Antonio.
San Antonio. I would say
outside of Kawhi,
and I would say for the most part, any team LeBron's on right now, any playoff contending team LeBron's on, current playoff contending team. What I mean by that is, right before the playoffs, there's always a massive trade that happens. It seems to be there's always a slight trade that happens for people who might not be satisfied in their role. There's only a few teams. I might have thrown in the Denver Nuggets this past year, Portland Trailblazers last year. Certain teams have players who were satisfied in their role.
I think
like
the Trailblazers. I think the Trailblazers for the last 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, but like
Dame,
what I'm trying to
Dame
say
is a great leader, though. I think a lot of it falls down on leadership. Like we mentioned, the Spurs. Like the Spurs had Tim Duncan, and what he learned was from David Robinson. That's why.
They had Kawhi for a period of time.
Then, but you got to remember it when David Robinson to Tim Duncan to Tony Parker to Manu Ginobili to Kawhi. But guess what? You just seen so many these guys have been successful in this system, and you got to remember they also had like Avery Johnson, they had Mario Elie, they had Sean Elliott, they had all these guys that you learn from. So now you have a system, and the consistency is the coach and the organization.
I think it goes back to what you said once again. That word organization goes back to organization, and then if we look at the Knicks, why weren't the Knicks able?
Goes back to the Knicks are paying for the sins, and when they traded Ewing to the Sonics.
It goes back to organization.
They're still paying for
those. They still got the bad juju. Where's Barkley from? Where's Ewing from?
Ewing's from Jamaica.
There you go. He still got that bad juju.
So I want to say this because you brought it up a little bit earlier, and you was talking about Jerry Krause, and I want to say Jerry wasn't far off because because he went back and he said no, they cut off, and there was the media being the media back then doing the same thing that they do now, like. But we're going to take this much. You might say this, but we're only going to take this much. We're going to put that in the headline.
I think it was even worse. Back then because now, we can easily go on YouTube. We can easily go on Twitter and find the
You can fact check.
You can even fact check. Back then, there was no internet to fact check. So it was that little blurb that the media showed. It was, it's pretty messed up how they were able to do that, man. Because looking at what he was able to do, like you said, most GMs, he was a general manager. They didn't go scout. That European prospect.
He didn't just scout the European.
He went to the colleges.
He scouted coach, and that's what I was talking to my brother the other day, and I want to mention this before we close out. So this is the thing about Krause, and this is why I feel like MJ and Scotty and all these guys had bad vibes to him. Is because his habits, his patterns. What pattern are you saying? How did he do Doug Collins?
Okay.
When he got the job, he scouted Phil Jackson. He scouted Phil Jackson.
But see, nowadays that's not a problem though. No, that's expected nowadays.
No, but think about this. This is a time where you need that trust. When we talk organization, we need that trust in the organization. He literally scouted his next coach and put him on the same bench as his current coach. And then when he said to the current coach, all right, well, we need to make these changes. No, I don't want to make these changes. All right, cool, you're out. But guess what? That's not the first time it happened. It happened recently because it happened in Golden State with Mark Jackson and Steve Kerr. The only difference is they didn't bring and put Kerr on the bench while Mark Jackson was the coach. So I say that because when we look back and we look at that, now you're talking about 2 seasons later, and you see them drafting Toni Kukoc, who happens to play the same basically position as Scotty, and you go on record saying, "Yo, he's the future of the Bulls." What do you think's gonna happen?
But see, look, we gotta look at it. We gotta look at it from this. If you're a GM planning for the future, you're planning for the long-term future.
Yes.
You know the trade value Scotty holds, especially at that contract that he signed under.
Yeah, remember they tried to trade him for T-Mac at one point. So like Scotty,
great trade.
In hindsight,
That would have been a great trade.
In hindsight.
Stupid as hell.
In hindsight. But at the same time, like, you got to look at, there's a lot of people that was trying to make that trade for T-Mac at that time before he hit his zenith. So, you know, I want to say this because when you look at Michael used any and every little thing to put a fire in him, right? Any and everything that you did, he took it as offense and he went out. He mentioned it. Anytime that Jerry Krause said he liked the player, all right, well, that's that player's fault. So, like, if I'm Jerry Krause, I'm gonna play Michael Jordan all the time. Yo, I love that Charles Barkley guy. I love that Patrick Ewing guy. Okay, you love him? All right, well, let me show you what I can do. Because every time that he said it, oh, Krause said he loved Toni Kukoc. Okay, well, we're gonna see. What did him and Scotty do? But then the bounce back. What did Toni do that next game? Toni went out and he worked. So, I mean, it is what it is for now. You know, circling back to The Last Dance. So basically, now is our time to bid our farewells. I want to thank every single person for taking the time and to being with us as we pull the curtains back. This is Speaking the Game episode 4. Be on the lookout for episode 5 soon. Look up. These are our @ names. Follow us on Twitter. Not just follow us on Twitter, hit the like button, subscribe. When you do subscribe, hit that bell button so your notifications could go off every time one of these episodes do drop. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, leave them in the comments. Until next time, y'all be good and y'all be great.
Yo, so is this our Charles Barkley episode since he wore number 4?